Hi, good evening. Welcome to my daily live session on mindset. Like every day, I would start with the weekly sharpening theme and then speak a little about mindset and then talk about my rhythms, review rhythms, or meeting rhythms as per my quarterly business template. So today's topic for the week is vendors, vendors and supply chain management. So let me talk about something in supply chain management which I feel is extremely important and how one could be doing it and why mindset hinders is in doing that. Supply chain is all about trying to get the material organized from the vendor for materials or services, whatever that you are procuring for the production or for the execution of the services. That's the main agenda of the supply chain management, and to ensure that the inventory levels are maintained at the lowest level, or let me say at the optimum level, and that the overall uh, cost is also maintained. The total cost, it's not the purchasing cost, but the total cost of ownership is at the lowest level. So that's the main purpose of, and of course the quality is the top. You get the best quality of the in the market, and at the same time you are ensuring reliability and consistency. Uh, when it comes to series production or mass production, you would have continuous orders flowing in from the customer, and therefore there are some constant volumes. And I explained to you sometime earlier about the bullwhip effect, which is that creates a huge variation at the vendor if the leveling and line balancing and the scheduling is not optimized and balanced at the in the assembly stage. Then the vendors would have a huge variation in their demand, and that is called as bullwhip effect. That has to be avoided. I think that's quite clear for mass production. If that is avoided, then mass production is more or less similar. You get an annual order, and then there is a schedule, and as per the schedule, the vendors he keeps supplying. And most of the cases, the vendor also manages inventory. It's called as VMI, vendor managed inventory. And of course, in some companies, they have given some additional cost because of that, because the inventory is now shifted to the vendor. And in some others, they have negotiated that the vendor absorbs the additional finance cost of the inventory so that he maintains the inventory in the finished goods. And depending on the customer demand, the materials are shipped to the customer. So that's something which is quite stable. Now, let us look at a situation where in supply chain, it's quite complex. Even for the vendors, it is quite challenging, and for the customers also, it is quite challenging. When you are talking about discrete orders, where the orders are not continuous, but they repeat. Maybe once in a year they repeat, once in a quarter they could be repeating, or and the volumes could be different. The type of the component that you want to purchase or procure is different. So there are a huge variety and diversity in what you are procuring. So in this condition, how are you going to ensure that the inventory levels are managed? This is a huge problem. You assume that there would be orders coming in, therefore you order some particular special meter, for example, special measuring equipment, which is to come from Japan or Germany, and that is ordered in a big bulk quantity because the MOQ is quite high. And since you ordered that, it came and it got into your factory and your company, and then it is lying there in the stores because the consumption is not there. Now, how do you address this? This is something which is quite challenging, especially for discrete items. How do you manage the inventory, and how do you make sure that the vendors also are not put into a big trouble? So this is something which is an interesting topic which I want to talk about today. And why does that not happen is also another thing which we need to discuss. Now, in the organization, there are multiple sources of information. I would call it as information uh, flow, or the information sources in an ecosystem. Now, let us look at a project organization where you got the projects being executed by a company, and that project will be executed at a client's place. And the client many a times need not be the direct end consumer. So the client could be a EPC company, which is engineering, procurement, and uh, construction. So EPC would be a different kind of a setup, the commissioning or construction, and EPC companies would then deliver this to another client, and that client may be delivering it to another client. So it's a long chain. So if you look at the order flow inflow, that order inflow depends, and the need to procure something depends on the progress of a project. If it is a project environment, if it is a discrete environment, it depends on the order inflow. Now, what needs to be done? or what can be done, or what I have experienced as something which is very, very effective, is to really have an outstanding information flow system. When I say information flow system, you're trying to pick up information from bits and pieces from everywhere. It could be a news item, it could be something to do with the report which was given by the sales guy, it could be the report which is given by the vendor himself. Vendor is talking about this used to be a case in our mass production, in fact, where we would come to know as to what is the quantity that the assembly the customer is planning based on the orders which the other uh, component manufacturers have got from the customer. We have got one product, and similar for using this product into his assembly or the customer's assembly, he would need to have components from the other vendors too. So keeping track with the other vendors, that could be one source, and look at the market, the PMI, Purchase Managers Index. There are multiple indicators. Now, if you suppose have all these indicators, and what an excellent and an exceptionally effective supply chain manager would do would be to look at all these inputs and then try to process it in his brain, in his mind, without really talking to anybody. And then based on that, he would take a decision whether to order or not order a particular item or not. And that is something which is going to give good results, because your decision making is based on to a great extent gut, but this gut feeling is validated by facts, by information which you have gathered from multiple sources. And to do that, one way of working is to have some kind of a regular review, which I keep telling day in and day out, where you are only reviewing, in this case, the information sources and what is the validity of the information. I'll give you a typical example. Let us say in the newspaper, there was a news that the government has released funds for the highways project. For example, day before yesterday, there was a big kickoff kind of a thing, or yesterday it was done by Modi in Bihar for various projects. Now, something like that happens, you know that the project has started. And also, you know that the funds have been allocated. There are two things there. Funds have been allocated. So now the fund availability is there. Therefore, that particular project in that project, the risk which you are going to take in ordering a particular long lead item, though the fund which is allocated to the project will come to you only after, let us say, about 3 months' time, because that's the lead time which they have got internally in those organizations to really process the order, process the inquiry, process the requirements, and then place an order. But you are not really playing in a very, very blind situation, because you know that that particular order will come, and therefore you make an order and procure the material. And for the vendor also, it's quite clear that in this case, the payment probability is very high, because the material will be consumed and the customer will be able to sell that product. If that is not the case, then it will be a issue always. Now, the question is, why is it that people don't gather information from all possible sources before taking a decision on placing an order, before taking a decision on informing the vendor what happens? Who is the one who's doing that in your company? Do you have anybody doing that? In our organization where I worked, my CEO was very good at that. Later, he became the CEO. At that time, he was the head of our business, and he was outstandingly good. He would collect information from all sources, all magazines, and read through that left and right every day in the night, and collect information, try to connect the dots, and after that, come up with some idea, and then talk about what inventories we need to manage. And that skill is something which is extremely essential, and I'm not sure who is doing that in your organizations. If somebody is not doing that, so please look into it. That's a very, very essential skill. It is not about just adding and subtracting numbers and placing an order on the vendor. It's about understanding the dynamics of the market, understanding the way the mega trends will impact your business, and based on that, decide on procuring especially those long lead items. That is one strategy. The other strategy is, even though it may seem totally absurd, it may still be viable to look at long lead items wherein you talk about a slight increase in price, and then talk about discussing the MOQ reduction. That is a very important thing. If the MOQ comes down to 1, minimum order quantity comes down to 1, then even if there is only a requirement for 1, you would only place an order for 1. You would not be placing an order for 25. That's the second strategy which one could adopt. And the third strategy which one could adopt is to reduce the replenishment time, reduce the procurement time, reduce the lead time for procurement. How can that be done? Only through two strategies. One is, it could be because the actual touch time. So there are multiple times in a particular lead time. Lead time has got is the time which is from the start to the end. And touch time is when you are really working on that product. In most of the cases, the lead time will be very, very high, whereas the touch time will be minuscule. It could be a very, very fractional percentage of the lead time. Touch time typically could be only about 2 to 3% of the lead time. Lead time, if it is 6 months, your 6 months would be what, 180 days. 180 days, and the lead touch time could be only about 10 days. That is the actual time during which this particular product is being manufactured. So in such case, it may make a fantastic amount of sense in going in for what is called as long-term agreements and long-term orders, where you talk about an annual volume with the customer and say that with the vendor, and talk about placing that particular volume, but you are not sure when you will be placing. But however, whenever you place, you need the lead time to be very low, which means the vendor has to have capacity available so that he can rearrange his orders or her orders in such a way that your order gets the priority. Moment it enters the system, it will be delivered after 10 days or 18 days. So as far as the touch time is concerned, and that's again another strategy which you can adopt. All these strategies could cost you a little money, but on the end, at the end, you would be saving a lot of money because of obsolete inventory. Once the inventory becomes obsolete, it's money stuck there, and if you calculate the interest on that, it's going to be phenomenal. Therefore, the concept of total cost of ownership is extremely important when you're doing purchasing. And why all this doesn't happen? Why do people don't really look at all information, gather the information, and then based on that take a gut decision to order? Why do people don't look at total cost of ownership when they're ordering? Why don't people look at increasing the cost of a material if the batch quantity comes down to one? Why don't people look at that? So all this is because of mindset. What is mindset actually? Mindset is something which we were what should I say? We inculcated because of our past. Basically based on our past emotional experiences and emotional memories that get that drive us to get some kind of a framework. And this framework is nothing other than the mindset, and that's something which is there in our subconscious. Subconscious mind observes and looks at everything, captures everything that happened in our life, just like that in a jiffy. In fact, it takes only about 250 microseconds for the subconscious to capture what's happening around us. And if you have seen and remember attending any hypnotic shows, either on TV or in live sessions, you can imagine the way people would remember what happened in their school days. Even the fellow is 70, 75 years old, he can think of what happened, remember what happened in his school days once he is hypnotized. So this, because the memory is always there, subconscious has all these memories, and these emotional memories, emotional experiences lead to a framework, and this framework is mindset. And based on this framework, that's very important, based on this framework, constantly predictions are being done. Now, what kind of a framework would not use any experience, any wisdom from outside, any kind of a assessment of the mega trends and trends outside and what's happening around, and to ensure that the volumes are ordered at the right time? That mindset would be that he is not never had the experience of ordering something more. He always ordered what was required, and it was working fine for him. And now he becomes the head of a supply chain management of a company where he has to take decision. He would never do that. His mindset would never drive him to do that. Of course, it would do that after maybe some time when he gets some experience, you can say, and that's where you say that he's become wiser. When he had some failures, has had some successes, and based on that, his mindset got programmed because of new experiences. Therefore, the predictions being done in the real-time basis are based on these new experiences. New experiences means that one is able to foresee the risk involved in ordering high quantities, foresee the risk involved in only going in for the lowest price for the L1 vendor. And there the decision making becomes much more effective. Effective decisions are those where you decide on something and it gets implemented seamlessly without any problem to the benefit of the outcome. That is an effective decision making. Imagine getting an item, 100 numbers you wanted, but the MOQ was 1000, so you bought 1000 items, and the 900 items stayed there, 100 got supplied, whereas 900 are stayed there stuck and you don't know what to do with that. That is not a good decision at all. And to be able to take good decisions, it's important that the predictions are being done correctly, because the amount of time that you have in your mind to take a decision or respond is just a fraction of a second. You're constantly perceiving something, and that perception is then used for connecting the dots to establish the cause and effect. That's the thinking process. Then once the cause and effect is established and the dots are connected, you decide either based on the gut or intuition, or it could be based on the effort and benefits. And finally, once the decision is taken, you would act or respond with consistency and conviction. So the four areas, which is perception, thought, decision making, and action or response, is what is governed by these predictions. And these predictions are very, very strong. It's like a flood coming into your life. Imagine if there is a huge rain and a flood, and you can't really swim against that. You can't really even walk against the flood. And that's the power of the prediction in a subconscious mind. And that's the power of the mind. And therefore, it's important that we change the mindset. We change the mindset to look at these things. So how can you do that? Very simple. Do discussions on contextual topics. Now, let's say a contextual topic is information. In our doHow game, which is invented by me, we do discuss that with the customers and talk about, let us say you heard from the site engineer that the delivery of the pre-stressed concrete slabs is delayed by 6 weeks. What are you going to do? How are you going to process that information? That's the information you got. That's the message you got. What are you going to do with that? And then so many a time people are really clueless. What am I going to do with that? If you're going to do a lot of things with that, you're going to really put on hold all the jobs that you're doing, because there is no point in getting your product ready, because unless the pre-stressed concrete structures are there in the site, will your product get used? Otherwise, you're going to make it with so much amount of effort, and it will be lying in the finished goods without the customer picking it up because he doesn't need it at that time. So these decisions are something, or you can also proactively get back to the customer and tell him that this is what it is. I've understood this, so I'm going to delay my supply by 6 weeks. And these are the things which have to be done. And for that, contextual discussion is something which is very important, based on the hints, which are the contextual hints. And these discussions and debates will give rise to emotional experiences, and they then will change the mindset gradually. That is one way. The other way of doing it is conducting meetings. You may think that I'm an idiot, but still I keep telling that meetings are a very, very nice way and a fantastic way of changing the mindset. Imagine in the meeting, if somebody, it need not be the leader or the director of the meeting, but anybody is asking the question, look, we have heard this information from the sales guy. What do you think we can do? Information that the site, information that the pre-stressed concrete elements in the site have not been supplied, and they're going to be delayed by 6 months. Or there was one case in my professional life when there was a big crisis in rubber industry because of some I think it was more to do with the government allocating lands or allowing the rubber plantation to be harvested, rubber to be harvested. So therefore there was a huge dearth for natural rubber, and in the tires which are manufactured for automobiles, there is a good content of natural rubber also which goes in. And because of the natural rubber constraint, there was a huge problem in the tire industry. The tires had to be imported from China or any other part of the world. And in India, they had a huge constraint. And that constraint led to a situation where the automobile companies would not get sufficient tires. So if the sufficient tire is not there, they can't make sufficient vehicles. So in such a case, we went on to take a decision to cut down our production, even though the customer had not cut down the demand. Because for us, it was clear that if we supply more, then only the items will be lying in the stores and we won't be getting the payments. So the payments are not going to come. There is no point in making more quantity. So though demand was very high, we cut down the demand. And of course, there you need to manage the expectations in terms of talking about why have you cut down the demand? What is the reason for that? That logical connection of the various information is extremely important. And that's once it is done, then it becomes very, very easy for people to understand as to why you are working based on information, based on the gut feel. Many times you say that, oh, this guy's gut is very good. What is the gut feel? Basically, he's trying to get information, gather information from everywhere. And based on that, his subconscious is giving him a directive and he's taking a decision. That's what gut feel is all about. Intuition is more to do with the feelings and emotions rather than any factual information. So that's something which is very important. So please do these discussions on during the meetings in terms of asking about information sources. When you're talking about trying to manage inventory levels, which is very, very critical, because that's a gold mine for any company. Money is stuck there. So try to see in what way you can gather information from all sources and make some sense out of that. And this kind of a meeting is called as a sense-making meeting. Sense-making meeting is you got information from various sources and you try to use that information and try to make sense and find out what can be the outcome of that sense of the various data which you have collected, various bits and pieces of information which you collected. And that could be done during a weekly meeting or a daily meeting too. So let me now talk about the daily meeting agenda, which I had not skipped for quite some time now. I think I'll spend very quickly go through the agenda. First is the scoreboard. Then after that, talk about the successes and failures from previous day. Rolling plan, frozen rolling plan with a five-day horizon. Then deviation management for any returns or surprises which you have had. Then confirm the seamless working of the teamwork, seamlessness. Then do some celebration or recognize somebody for any small achievement which was done that pumps up the team that is required. And finally, escalate in consensus. These are the 7 topics of the daily meeting. And on a weekly basis, start talking about your open point list of all the actions which you have defined for, in this case, is supply chain and vendors, what all improvements you need to do, and what is the status of those actions. And after that, look at all the irritants and issues which you had last week, and then try to prioritize them to pick up only the 20% which is going to impact the 80% of them. 80-20 is applicable here very much. Prioritization is extremely important. And after that, do the root cause analysis for the prioritized ones, define the corrective and preventive actions, and definitely do the validation, which is very, very important. And finally, work on the contingency buffer. Contingency buffer in this case could be multiple things. When it comes to vendor, if you have to, let us say, ensure that the material comes on 30th of this month, make sure that the vendor is told that it should come on the 29th of the month. So you've got 1 day buffer. So like that, you need to build in the contingency buffer. That's something which is very, very mandatory. And because without buffer, nothing will work. Buffer is mandatory, but only put the buffer at the right place. You can't put buffer everywhere. Then it is absolute nonsense. It will only make your product very, very expensive. So put the buffer at the right place, and then ensure that the buffer is made to the right extent. When it is cost reduction, maybe you need to have a set of projects which can achieve 10% more cost reduction than what you have as a target. Or when it comes to inventory, maybe you need to have actions to reduce the inventory by another 30%. Though the inventory reduction need not be done, you have actions to do that so that you can at least meet the inventory goals. So that they are the contingency buffers in supply chain. So with that, thanks a lot for watching. And please don't forget to do the baby step, which is to talk to your friends, neighbors, colleagues, or relatives on their perceptions of people-to-people interactions and what you assume their perceptions would be. Try to find the commonalities and the differences and start a dialogue to establish a common collective mindset. For those of you in India, have a nice evening. For those of you outside India, have a great day ahead. See you tomorrow, more or less the same time. Goodbye.